invite our panelists and our moderator. My name is Fan Jiang. I'm a third-year major in economics, and I'm the student coordinator of our panel. So today we're very glad to invite Dr. Terrell as our panelist. He's the director of the Institute for Molecular Engineering at the University of Chicago. During his career, he has co-authored more than 300 papers and supervised 80 PhD students. He holds a BS in the chemical engineering from Northwestern, and and he has a PhD from the University of Massachusetts. So right now, let's join me in welcoming our panel.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. It's a good crowd, and I will be moderating this session. I'm going to ask the other panelists to introduce themselves in a second. And then I will be posing some questions to them for about half of the time, and then we'll open it up to questions from you guys, and that's how we'll handle it. I think most of the highlights of my own background were covered there, but just to fill in a few more details, I came here in 2011 with the mission to start the Institute for Molecular Engineering. Prior to that, I was chair of bioengineering at UC Berkeley. Prior to that, I was Dean of Engineering at UC Santa Barbara. And then I started my career and spent 22 years at the University of Minnesota in chemical engineering and material science. So I've experienced a lot of different academic environments and a lot of different climates over the course of my career. And believe me, after 22 years in Minnesota, nothing about Chicago weather bothers me. So, but please, let me have the panelists introduce themselves, starting right here.
Okay. Hi, I'm JC Conrad. I am a 1999 graduate of the college. My undergraduate degree is in mathematics. I did most of a degree in physics before minors were possible. I got a master's degree and then a PhD in physics from Harvard in 2005. I was a postdoc at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign in materials science until 2009. And then in 2010, I started my current position. I'm an assistant professor of chemical engineering at the University of Houston.
My name is David Simmons. I am a 1975 graduate of the college. I also went to lab school and have a master's degree in urban studies. My college major was political science. I am currently at Metro, the commuter rail agency, where I direct grant administration. I spent 25 years at Chicago Transit Authority, where I was capital budget director, basically overseeing investment in capital improvements.
Hi, everybody. My name is Scott Morris. I'm a econ major from college, and I have an MBA from what is now called the Booth School in Finance and Statistics. I've spent almost all my career in the financial services sector. Most of my work is in research and trading. I do a lot of quantitative modeling. I apply a lot of scientific techniques, experimentation, and so forth, and do a lot of empirical analysis on security prices. And I've been stalling long enough for my. Oh, one interesting thing too. I was also an exotic dancer when I was at the University of Chicago. Just kidding.
Did you walk on the plaque?
I walked on the plaque a lot too. Yeah.
So we're just introducing ourselves, Donald. So you got here right in time. Thanks.
Right. I need to push that?
I think you can just talk.
Okay. My name is Don Bottaro. I'm a senior scientist at the National Cancer Institute, specifically in the urologic oncology branch. My work has mainly to do with the cancer biology of urologic malignancies. I have a small lab group, but we have both basic interests as well as translational work that deals with patients who have urologic malignancies, which are seen in our clinics. And so while I was an undergraduate, I studied hard and I tried to get good grades, but I didn't always get the best grades I could. But nonetheless, I think the college gave me something that I value to this day in terms of being rigorous about educating myself and about having confidence in some basic abilities, and also about embracing people, which I think our speaker, our keynote speaker, illustrated very well. And so happy to be here.
Thank you, Don. Did you, let me start with you on a specific question.
Sure.
So we've heard some of the facts and figures about people's lives, but I think we also want to get into some of the mental processes that went on. Did you visualize yourself doing something like what you're doing now when you were graduating from the college?
Actually, I did. I think, I was a biology major, biology and biochemistry, and I actually took a job as an undergraduate in one of the labs in the Department of Biological Sciences in the hospital. And I didn't know at that time that, I had a very, very strong interest in biology. And I didn't know whether it would be more medical or more basic biology. And in the end, I had decided that I would go to graduate school for a PhD and do research. And I think I was being probably a little restrictive in that regard. Basically, what I saw about medical care didn't interest me as much at that time because it just seemed mundane. That's just a feeling I had at that time. It's not true anymore. If you've been a patient for any amount of time, that goes away quickly. And if you've had the opportunity to interact with people who need your help and you can help them, then you get past that too. I still do really value the basic, the sort of strong hold I had on basic research and the belief that I would be contributing to basic science in a way that would further humanity in a more abstract way than immediately translatable endpoints. And yet my work now does include translatable endpoints, so I've grown. I have changed in that regard. And I think it really came about because of an opportunity. It just so happened that what I was working on as a basic science problem became immediately translatable because a group of people were discovered with a specific gene defect that involved that same pathway, and that causes a very specific type of cancer. So it was an opportunity for me to just step into something immediately, and the decision was, well, should I do that? Because it wasn't what I really thought I would be doing. And actually, I'm so happy to have done that. It was great to branch out a little bit from what I thought was getting a little restrictive in terms of
do any of the other panelists feel that they ended up in a very different place from where they imagined being or didn't really know about the opportunities that they ended up participating in? Go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
As I looked at my career, trying to kind of figure out how I got where I got, there's a certain logic. I was in political science as a surrogate for pre-law, and in that I got to study various urban politics and urban policy questions. That led me into the program in urban studies, which was kind of an interdisciplinary program, geography and sociology and so on. Ultimately, I got a city planning degree from Harvard, which led into transportation planning. And now I do urban policy issues of investment in various transportation systems, stations. Do you invest in stations in one location or another, or do you invest in roadbed instead, which isn't as visible? So there's kind of a logic to how I got there, although it certainly wasn't planned or mapped out.
Yeah, right. Maybe you could explain your progress from mathematics degree to chemical engineering.
Right. So when I was a college student, I totally bought the Kool-Aid. Okay, I was 100%. I wanted to do fundamental research, and I was pure. But two things were apparent. I was the double math physics major. I switched in a moment of passion to mathematics by dropping my third year, second quarter physics class. But I knew that I wasn't going to be a research mathematician. I don't have the right temperament, and I knew that I didn't have the right skill set. And I wanted to go to graduate school in physical sciences. So I was doing research in an astrophysics lab, again, still very focused on pure. I applied to graduate schools and basically picked one where I had a pretty wide variety of advisors to work from in physics, because I thought that would be the most flexible, and I was all about flexibility. And then when I went to graduate school and I started listening to advisors, the person for whom I eventually worked, This was in an era when string theory, I don't know how many people are physicists here, was really big, okay? So you get all these people going up talking about string theory. My graduate advisor got up and started telling us about the mechanical properties of toothpaste. And it was fascinating because I'd never thought about it. Okay, and if you want, I'm happy to talk afterwards about what an awesome material toothpaste is because I still love this example. But it turns out that toothpaste is awesome for the same way that a lot of your cells in your body are awesome. So I ended up working for a group that was between the boundary of, I would say, physics and engineering. My graduate advisor had appointments in both. Really considers himself as an applied physicist and is more heavily associated with the engineering school than with the physics department there. And so when I was going to do a postdoc, there were two options available. So the general field in which I work is called soft matter or complex fluids. You can think of these as fluids with things in them, particles, stuff, polymers, or materials that are easy to deform and flow but still behave either like solids or fluids. This is toothpaste. And at that point, people could choose between going and really doing biophysics work or trying to move into engineering. And I wasn't interested in being a biophysicist, even though I do a fair bit of work that now touches on applications in biology. So I went to become an engineer. I did a postdoc in a material science lab, and I didn't understand what the difference was between material science and chemical engineering. Now I do. I thought they were the same, and everybody told me a lot my first year how different they were. And then when I was applying for jobs, it was really what was a good academic fit for what I do. So what I do in some sense is very classical chemical engineering with a pretty fundamental bent. I still have my Chicago roots. I still work that's pretty mathematical, very fundamental. I work a lot with my colleagues who are interested in translational research, and that's been a really nice place for me to hang out and hide. Again, the example I've been using because I'm excited about it right now, I work with one of my colleagues looking at the development of novel diagnostics. We use a format that's based on pregnancy tests. Again, you haven't thought about how cool an idea a pregnancy test is, but I'm happy to discuss that offline too. But, and how simple and how these are actually really excellent materials to be used in low resource settings. But there's a bunch of really fundamental questions understanding how the things that eventually become the signal in a pregnancy test move through the matrix that makes up the test. So that's what my group does. We do a lot of work looking at transport of complex fluids inside confined media, and we work a lot with people in translation. So for me, it's been a continual movement from very, very pure to very, very applied. But it's also, I retain all my roots. So that's how I got there.
Thanks. Scott, maybe you could talk about some experiences you had that are beneficial.
Also, maybe open it up a little bit more general. And
sure.
Say, what is the relationship between finance and applied science, you might ask? And a lot of people that are in finance do come from the applied sciences. And one of the core reasons is because the problems, the tools and the problems that we solve in finance are very similar to some of the problems that are solved in the applied sciences. We're just using a different subject matter. We're using stock price information or accounting data from a company or something like that. But a lot of the tools, a lot of the research techniques are very, very similar. It's just the subject matter is different. And also another difference is that the exactness that we use in finance is nowhere near. There are no laws per se in finance. There's only kind of rules, and that leads us to sort of create some more strategies that are maybe not as exacting as what the Fermilab did to prove that the top quark existed or whatever. They spent 15 years of researching. We would not ever do anything like that. We would say, yeah, this looks good enough. Let's go on and try to solve the next problem. So if you like solving mathematical problems and experimentation, you can do it in finance. Your subject matter is just a lot more short-term and more, I would say, a little bit more dynamic.
So we have people here in very different kinds of careers: academic, public policy, finance, biological research. I'd probably like to hear from everybody, maybe starting with Don, about what qualities or attributes the career path that you're in is looking for, and how students should. What are a few key things about how students might prepare themselves well?
One of the things I think that wasn't emphasized when I was an undergraduate, and that I see is very helpful now, is networking, especially, events like this, of course, started 18 years ago, but they've grown, and this is much more of an advantage now than it ever has been. I think that a lot of scientists are geeks, and they, math, physics. I mean, they spend a lot of time with books and chemicals and tools, and they don't spend as much time with people, maybe, or they have, there's a little bit of withdrawal there. There's not as much of sort of socializing, or it's a little different. And I think that the skills that a lot of people that I saw who went into industry, even sales or where and marketing and or even law, where if you didn't engage your opponent in a personal way, not necessarily empathic but personal, then you were kind of at a disadvantage. And so I think that one of the things that I would emphasize is that you take an approach that would serve you no matter what field you go into, to socialize, develop socialization skills that allow you to network, and take advantage of networking opportunities. So this is a huge networking opportunity, but if you just talk to a few people, you might not be getting the most that you could get out of it. And so you want to think about that. You want to think about how you can take advantage of events or networks that are available electronically or through periodicals and just communication, to clearly and effectively communicate what you think you want to do, or articulate your questions about what doing this is like, so that people can answer them to your satisfaction. In other words, if you ask the wrong question, you're not going to get an answer that satisfies you. So you have to think about your questions carefully, and you have to be aware that your questions may pose some burden, and so that you have to interact with that person in a sort of friendly, polite way. These all seem like very basic things, but they're important, because you just have to have a way of approaching someone, noticing a little bit about what they're like and what they might want from you, when you take the chance to network about opportunities. I mean, it's all been an exploration, and I guess the biggest people who have helped me along my way in reaching and coming to the profession where I am now are people who were kind and who would answer the questions, and who just took the time. And there were others that didn't, and I don't admire them less, but they weren't as helpful. I mean, it's just a fact. In other words, they accomplished a lot, and I know exactly the type of person, and maybe even names of who I'm talking about. But I think that they get less out of their own life by not engaging in a little more personal level, and articulating the questions carefully that they want to ask about their careers.
So social and networking skills are one attribute.
Yeah, I think very important, and I think biologists weren't ever it wasn't at the top of the list. You had to have expertise in what you felt was your primary focus, but not necessarily people skills. I'm not saying that people skills can replace a knowledge of your primary focus. I'm just saying that in order to arrive at the place that you want to be in 5 years or 10 years, then people skills will always help you get there, together with a good education.
That's one good point. Other attributes that people would like to emphasize need to be cultivated? Anything from technical to
I'll go
technological or whatever.
So when we're looking for a new research analyst in a financial firm, generally we're looking for a skill base. It doesn't have to be experience in finance, but we're looking for people that have experience with using certain tools and solving certain problems. And one of the great things about the applied sciences is that you do a lot of this stuff. I remember interviewing a young lady from the University of Chicago a while back that was a biologist, and her experience was working with petri dishes, testing out different things and summarizing the results and running some statistical analysis on that. And that skill translates very well into the field of finance. So part of the challenge for...
You mean the hands-on, intimate involvement?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly, the process, the experimental process where you try something out and then you tweak it, you try it again, you run the analysis on it, and you come up with a conclusion. And there's noise involved in the process, and kind of like financial price series. And so part of the challenges for applied science students that are interested in finance is to making sure that people understand those skills on their resumes and the cover letters, so that people can understand, well, that's exactly kind of what we do here. So those research skills, programming skills are very important. People skills are very important too. I mean, working in teams are really important in any kind of business that you do. And then I think probably, obviously, some indication that you're interested in the subject matter, some kind of experience that says, look, even though I'm in the applied sciences, it's not just a lark that I'm talking to you about this finance position. I've done something else in my background that says, if you take a chance on me, I'll work out because I have this past experience to prove it.
Yeah. David, other things to add?
I mean, you have the root skills of just being able to write, facility with things like Microsoft Office, showing that you're knowledgeable in various computer systems, even if it's not systems that are being used by a particular business, but just that you have a facility and ability to manipulate various systems. One advantage that you all have is that you're kind of at the cutting edge, whereas in government and many other places, we don't necessarily have the latest systems, and so you can actually bring some new ideas and new methods to the workplace. And one thing that, in terms of kind of once you get your foot in the door, is I think it's important to kind of stake out a area of expertise and kind of really get to know that area and become a subject matter expert, and just gain a name for yourself as a person to go to in that topic, so that people get to notice you, and then it gives you an opportunity to then move within the organization. It's important, again, just to kind of get your foot in the door first, and then from there you can kind of get the lay of the land and move about within it.
A couple 2 quick points. I agree with just everything Ruben said, especially, again, if you're a math, physics geek, okay, social skills, please work on them now. Engineers are good at this. The last 2 things I wanted to say is first, emphasize communications, okay? So in my daily job, I can communicate with, sometimes all in the same day, undergraduates like yourselves, my graduate students that I advise, my colleagues who have the similar technical basis, but also I talk to people trying to give me money. I talk to both scientists and managers at companies. And each one of those audiences requires different skills and different ways of talking about what we do. And I think that's where students from the college can have an advantage because of the focus on writing and on communication here. And then the second one, I have to say this as an academic, intellectual curiosity, okay? I love thinking about problems. And I think, again, the sort of distinction I would draw between applied science perhaps and pure science is I like thinking about we do fundamental stuff, but I like thinking about things that could eventually impact. And so there's 2 skills there. One is looking for a problem that you might be able to solve. And second, being able to develop the models. And that touches again on computing, on technical skills, and on all of that. So that's the 2 things I would say.
How do you like being an assistant professor? What's it like? I was one once a long time ago.
So this is a point I was going to make, but I'll make now too. So I was going to say that one thing that's really interesting about being an assistant professor is that the world has changed. It's really, the world is very entrepreneurial right now. So a lot of my job looks a lot like my friends who work in startup companies, okay? I'm not old enough where I don't have friends in startups yet. And, everything from sort of a single-minded passion for my work, which is a lot of what I do, to, again, that idea of being able to talk to different constituencies who are each involved in my day-to-day job. Okay? So being an assistant professor is hard. It really is. It's very stressful. I go up for tenure in 6 months, so I'm at sort of apex stress right now. So but I think what carries me through is that I love what I do. I really do. I can talk excitedly about all the things that are going on in my lab. I do a lot of service and outreach, and that's something that I think is, again, a unique feature of an academic life. I do a lot of outreach aimed at recruiting women to science and engineering. I actually do a lot of informal mentoring of women younger than me. It's never intentional, but I mentor graduate students that aren't mine. I mentor graduate students at other schools who aren't mine on how to look for jobs and how to start their faculty careers. And then we do a lot of work aimed at how to recruit more people in general, especially underrepresented communities into science. So all that stuff, again, is really excited. Those are the things I get excited about that keep me going, okay? Grant rejections are no fun whatsoever, and you get a lot of them. And it's stressful, but I think that I've been really fortunate, and I think this is something that you should consider, is to really build your network, but also build your network both of peers and of mentors. And I've been really very, very lucky to have a series of strong and committed mentors who've helped me navigate a fairly tricky path.
I think we'd be interested in hearing from others about what your job is like on a day-to-day basis, or what keeps you interested in it, and maybe how it's changing too. Do you feel like talking about that, Don?
Yeah, because I work in the government, so I think that people are always there are a lot of sort of myths or rumors or truths, part truths about working in the government, especially the federal government, but I'm sure other governments have these issues. They're large organizations, and they are really public service in the sense that, it's not driven to succeed monetarily, which would help it in some cases, but it's driven to succeed in an endpoint various. I mean, health, defense, education. And so I think when you work in the government, you have to be prepared to embrace a lower wage, perhaps, or limited resources, or people who are tired because they work really hard and they're struggling just like you are, and and they're getting a little frustrated. And so I think I'm not going to paint a picture of a public servant being, frustrated out of torture, although some do.
But it's also pretty motivational for people.
Yeah,
too.
well, I mean, what it keeps you doing is appreciating that what you're doing is motivated by something, that's separate in a certain way. In other words, it's public service. So it means helping people in any way that you can, in the position that you have, to the best of your ability. And there will be compromises in how the government can help you execute that. But nonetheless, I think what you see in your fellow members of your team are the same goals, and so you get past all those frustrations. I think one of the things you see in people who are in the government less than 5 years is you see them gradually feeling the frustration and getting antsy, and then after some period where they've more or less committed, that may be where they're going to spend a longer period of time. More buying in, like don't whine about that, and okay, that's a problem we have to deal with, but just get past it. And so we're doing problem solving for our usual job-related activities as problem solvers, let's say, but we're also problem solving the way, how we can execute our job, because all of the things we'd like in place to do it, aren't there. So that's one thing I can add in terms of government service. I think you have to buy into the idea of public service as something that you want to do because that's what you feel you should do. The other part I would mention about this is that, and these points have come up truly about not just networking, but the communication aspect of it, and being articulate. Okay, so I don't know how many people have seen this movie lately about the Enigma machine that was used for coding during World War II. It's a very, very nice movie, but one of the interesting scenes, there's a hero of the movie that is a brilliant coder. But as he was growing up, he didn't know what he was going to do, and his brother had a book about code, and he said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, it's a book about code. You know what's code? Well, code is when somebody talks to you in the symbols and words that you already know, but they're saying, but you can't understand their meaning And he said, well, how is that different from just conversation? And so, people never say what they mean. That's what he said. It's a poignant part of the movie. It's cute, but in a way, it brings us to a point where communication is not easy. And in particular, if you go into a field where writing is important, writing is not easy. Writing is very, very hard. If your writing is meant to communicate with a broad spectrum of readers, and you want them to be persuaded or understand your point, then you have to go through great efforts to make your point precisely and directly. And I think scientists learn this early on because their writing is by necessity precision-oriented. But I think all fields where you really want to capture, you really want to inform and sometimes persuade, that your writing skills become really, really important. And you'll struggle with them your entire life. You can never, be too good at writing down concisely and directly what you want someone to understand. And so I think that the core of the college when I was there, wouldn't let you get out of the English classes or the other classes that would help you improve your, speaking and writing. But writing more than anything because it's lasting. And to this day, I still text and email a lot more than I talk on the phone. And that's because talking on the phone sometimes doesn't get my point across as carefully as if I write something down, read it a few times, and ask, is that exactly what I want to say? And so it's a small point, but I think that when you're out there trying to look for a job, you really do need to ask questions carefully and explain yourself carefully so that people get the right impression of who you say you are and what you say you want to do. And when you write, please read it twice.
David, you made a point earlier that I thought was a very good one, which is in any job, and I certainly know this as our other panelist does, assistant professors place a premium is placed on them of making themselves distinctive, carving out a place. And you were pointing out that that's important in whatever organization you join. I'm wondering to talk a little bit more about how you do that, and in one particular way. All universities and ours does this too, emphasizes interdisciplinary activities and bringing more than one skill to bear. And I'm wondering how relevant that seems to any of you. Maybe Scott could talk about this afterwards too. But is the university's emphasis on interdisciplinarity a useful direction for career building?
Yeah, I would say so, and kind of to build on what Don is saying, that as you deal with a variety of people, they will come from their own disciplines, and I think that having had experience either taking classes in another discipline or working with people in another discipline, you kind of get an idea of what their framework is, and it's first of all just learning to communicate in their language, but also then what's driving them. So I think that's useful, especially if you're not going into if you're in a certain field, but you're not going to necessarily apply that field in a pure sense, and it kind of builds on what you were saying about layering mathematics and physics and so on. That I think there's a real benefit of being able to integrate a variety of approaches and maybe get a unique perspective on things.
Yeah. Any particular thoughts on interdisciplinarity?
Well,
Scott?
I think the term intellectual capacity is a great one, and I think that well-rounded people do amazing things. But again, there's two tracks. What you need to do is you need to find out your own passions and personally what you like to do and how you like to do it. So some people are awesome programmers or awesome traders or awesome whatever they are, okay, because they really enjoy just doing that one thing and focusing on it. And if that's you, then that's what you should do because you're going to be successful there. I like to do a ton of different things personally, And I look for people that, certain people, and when I'm putting together a team, I want some people like that not maybe don't getting bored easy is not the best way to put it, but someone that is willing to try different things and experiment and sort of feel comfortable getting out of their comfort zone and growing that way. So it's good to have people like that. And it's good to explore that. I know that when I went to business school because I wanted to learn how to become a better financial market researcher, and that was the only thing that was available at that time. What I learned in business school, like what I learned at my undergraduate degree, is that I got so much more as my career grew out of the other things I took: the marketing, the the strategy, the entrepreneurialism, and so forth. It's the same with, if you guys I say I love science, that's all I want to think about. Open up your mind and take an English class or whatever. I think those resumes, for one thing, are much more interesting to look at because it shows the intellectual capacity component. But in the end of the day, when you're forming your career, think about yourself and find out what you really like to do. And once you figure that out, then you want to focus your talents in that direction.
Thanks. We've got a little over a half an hour to go, so I'm going to open it up for questions in a minute. But I also would like to offer all of the panelists a chance to say anything that the questions didn't bring out, or you came here with something in your mind that you were hoping to have a chance to say. Now would be a good time to say it. You don't have to say anything, so. Yeah.
No, well, I just
Go ahead, David. Yeah.
kind of the question of what keeps you coming to work every day, or what do you enjoy about it? And one thing is the feeling of public service, but also I view it as kind of a challenge that almost like a game of Tetris, that I've got a certain budget, I've got a certain set of problems, and I'm always trying to work this puzzle of fitting them together. And it's not that I don't take it seriously, but you can kind of create this challenge for yourself that keeps you viewing things from a new perspective every day, or it's constantly changing.
Any other thoughts, or should we take some questions?
Do you guys know what Tetris is?
Oh yeah.
Right. I used to have it in my first job. Sorry to digress. I had this old IBM 8086 machine. It was the first real PC, and we had a version of Tetris. Of course, there was no mouse, so you would use your keypad with it. But you could click the escape key, and it would bring up a Lotus spreadsheet, so you could hide from your boss whether you were playing Tetris. So I don't know if they still have that feature, but it was very handy. I guess there was no Windows back then, so now you can just bring up a different window. But anyway, I digress. Apologize.
Let's hear some questions.
I think this is coming back to a point that Scott made. I am more of a generalist by nature. I am interested in a lot of things. I spent my fourth year in college not taking math or physics, really. So for me, it's how I like to operate. I'm good at being able to talk to people. I think this is also back to communications. I talk to lots of people to learn their language, to learn about their problems. So I do have friends who are academic physicists who have spent most of their careers in one area, and I think that's an issue. So the way that I would suggest anyone who's interested in an academic career is first, develop your expertise. Really, you have to do that. You have to say, people have to know that you do something. Second, make it a regular habit to read broadly, or go to seminars broadly, or go to a conference for something you know nothing about. Okay? This is actually just generally valuable if you're intellectually curious, right? Go challenge yourself. That's how you grow. Keep challenging yourself. That's how you don't die. So that's what I do. Like I said, I'm probably a little too, I'm a bad example, right? I'm a little too stretched thin. But I've really learned a lot by being in a discipline that I didn't grow up in. And that's been extremely professionally valuable to me and extremely intellectually rewarding. And it's because I talk to everybody in my department. And I work with a good fraction of them. And we have 4 theme areas, and I am the first person to collect one from all 4. So I'm excited about that. This is from Matt. I actually got myself involved in a reaction engineering proposal, which is really not what I do at all. Partly by just saying, here are some skills I think that we can solve a materials processing issue that you can't solve, okay? And so that's actually really exciting. So that's what I do. I talk to people, I read broadly, I go to seminars all over the place at my own university. I keep, and that I think is the easiest way for me. But again, follow your own strengths and the way that you operate. I do have friends who are absolutely happy and who find ways to continue to have a sustainable career built on studying a single problem. Okay, so I think a lot of that comes back to who are you and what will make you happy. And how do you operate? And those are questions that obviously require some amount of fairly careful soul searching.
There was another question over
Can
there.
I interject one
Sure,
point about that? I think that's a really great point, and I think it highlights a really strong thing, a takeaway for you guys, is the difference between specialization and generalization. And it really, there's no right answer. It depends on the person. I would also interject that there is risk in being a generalist. And one of the reasons that people tend to focus on one area and kind of get stuck in that is that they don't want to take the risk. They're not they're risk-averse people, which most people are. And so, yes, they might have an opportunity to go do something else, but there's a cost in doing that. There's a cost in learning about it, and there's also the cost in going off in a direction where you might not be successful where you were before. So you have to tie all those things together. But in the end, I'm kind of like that. I like to do a lot of stuff, and I've taken risk. But in the end, I don't care. If it doesn't work out for me, I wouldn't be happy doing anything else. So sort of I have to do it that way. That's just because it's innate in me to do it that way. So your goal, what you should try to do over the next couple of years is figure out that aspect about yourself, and that will help you.
Go ahead.
There's a real basic need to fill that niche of academic clinicians. It's what keeps the medical field advancing in terms of its art. And so you usually find those people with those degrees at academic centers, but not necessarily. But also, as I said, it fulfills a real need. However, the decision about whether to pursue that or not is a very difficult one, because I don't think that anyone, at least I looked at the same decision, and the conclusion that I came to was that the medical part was not what I wanted to do, and so why am I doing that? And I'm going to spend 4 years doing something that's just, what I felt was the danger was that I would put myself 4 years out from doing what I really wanted to do, or God help me, stop liking that part of research that I wanted to do and just do something else that, you might think wasn't as fulfilling. And so these are very big problems to struggle with. I mean, in terms of, there's a lot of people struggling with it, and it's a big problem. And I think that you really have to ask yourself, is practice going to be part of what you'd like to do every day? And if it's not, how often? And if the answer comes up that's like once a month or once a year, then you don't want to do that. That's not it. So then I would say, don't do that. Now that's a risk, because a lot of people, it was true when I was an undergraduate, and I don't know how true it is now, but a lot of people saw a medical degree as kind of a grant to be able to do research, because you had a more needed profession. In other words, you could find a job more easily because of the skill set you had in treating people. Yet what you really wanted to do was do research. And that's a little bit of a myth in terms of, and you shouldn't pursue the joint degree for that reason. And I don't know if people still do that, but the idea that you'd have greater job security with a medical degree because you could always treat patients, and so there were more job opportunities, and yet you would be able to do research. The problem there is that if you find yourself in a situation where job security comes first and you have to treat patients, you're not going to be doing research very much. So in other words, it pays to make a decision early and a commitment early about how much you want to do research. If research is not really the most important part of that, if you'd like to stay if you'd like to be an academic clinician, you can do that without the other degree. You can be a very well-informed medical practitioner with an MD degree and work in an academic center, and you don't need to have both degrees. You may think it makes you more competitive, but honestly, if your strength will be in treating patients, it'll be seen. I think that, again, a lot of people think it's just a compromise. You take two professions and you can't do either one of them to the best end. And that's not entirely true. People do both things, and some do them very, very well. We see plenty of examples of that. So I don't think you should believe that. I think that's a myth, too. But I do think that you really have to believe in your heart that you want to treat patients on a day-to-day basis, and that at the same time, you'll have you'll find the time and you'll have the drive to be able to ask research questions, and they may not even be directly related to the patients you treat, and there's the sort of uncoupling of those two things. But nonetheless, if you believe you're a person capable of that, then you should do it.
Thanks. Thank you. Way in the back. A few times a day.
Yeah, it was like last minute, like 5 minutes ago.
You mean we don't doubt ourselves now?
It's a fair question. And she wants to hear from everybody, but probably ought to keep it somewhat short.
That's fine. I'll keep it short. So the answer is yes. Again, I'll tell you, being an academic scientist is sort of like playing baseball, but with a worse batting average right now. Okay? Grant funding rates are very low. Okay? So grant rejections are hard. Paper reviews can be very hard. Student interactions can be hard. All the time. And so how do you get over that? A combination of tenacity, a strong support network, something to blow off the steam. For me right now, that's running, cardio, kickboxing, and losing to squash with one of my colleagues. I'm a terrible squash player, but I really like doing it. So I think that developing those coping skills with whatever you do is important. But there will be doubt, to be honest, in probably most career paths, and you have to learn to find a way to manage.
That's probably the answer for everybody, but is there any new insights into that anybody wants to offer? I mean, it's certainly true of me. You may have meant the question a little bit more in the sense of, was there a big crisis in your life or something where the doubts came to a head and you thought about doing something radically different? And, I bet all of us have experienced that to some extent or another, too.
Well, I would just say that, your stage of your career development, you shouldn't worry about things like that. I mean, because you can always change if it's. I don't think anybody knows going forward. This is what I'm going to end up doing. So I think there's a lot of randomness that's involved in a lot of career paths, and that's kind of the fun of it. So you learn some basic skills, and you go in one direction you think makes sense, and you can move around if you need be. So.
Well, let me answer that a little bit, and other people can devise their own answers. But first of all, just as we have an example with Professor Conrad here, who came from the pure sciences to be a professor of engineering, many engineering graduate programs are open to science students, with a little bit possibly of a certain amount of extra fundamental coursework that has to get worked in, but certainly in the chemical engineering and material science and bioengineering departments, we brought in students from chemistry, physics, and biology all the time. I do think you need to talk to an advisor who's knowledgeable about particular programs and so on, so that you would find the most hospitable home for what you're looking at, but it definitely can be done. Basically the difference, I'd say both science and engineering, and I'm dealing with this every day on our campus now, we're trying to create an engineering program that operates very close to fundamental science. That's the idea of molecular engineering. But there is a difference between science and engineering in mentality, and it's roughly, science is about curiosity and nature and discovery and understanding how the world works. and engineering's about invention and design and application, and I like to say about changing how the world works, but just put in a little plug for engineering there. But it's true. But they're both, I mean, discovery and invention are both very creative intellectual activities. And when you talk about science and engineering, you're not labeling people, because the same person can do both things. It's modes of thought that many of us have both lines. But anyway, any further thoughts
Very
on that?
quickly, again, look at particular programs. Some will it will be easier than others. We get students from non-engineering. They often have to take our undergraduate classes. So you have to take a couple more classes, but we had this discussion at lunch too. Having a strong fundamental background will carry you through many engineering programs. So math, physics, chemistry, bio, in whatever combination makes sense for the program. But then I would be very specific and try to reach out to graduate directors at those particular programs. But it's absolutely doable, and we see students from other backgrounds all the time. But identify, I think Matt's point's excellent, right? What kind of approach are you interested in for the world?
It just occurred to me, but the department head in chemical engineering and material science, under whom I worked for 15 years, was a University of Chicago chemistry PhD. So.
Here are the basic differences. We teach less. We have fewer contacts with people of undergraduate age and younger. Most of the people we train are older, in the sense of graduate students, in fact, are far fewer, but postdocs are maybe as numerous or more numerous by proportion. And we don't compete for grants in the same way that people in the extramural community do. We are evaluated in a similar way in terms of peer review. We have, at the NIH, there's a 4-year peer review process that's all done from an outside group that are chosen, to judge your performance as a scientist. So I think it's rigorous, as most universities. And that's what assures that the program stays of a high quality. So most of the training that we do is with older trainees, closer to the being in their full profession. And I like engaging. We have high school students who volunteer sometimes in the summer. We have undergraduates who volunteer either in summer or sometimes on a term that they can get credit for as an undergraduate. We're happy to have those people. I think traditionally, though, the institutions haven't had those programs, so they're not certainly anything like being at an academic institution where the bulk of this body is of the years for either graduate school or undergraduate school. So it is different in that regard. However, from a professional perspective, I think, what we miss is the inquisitiveness of younger people and the general questions they pose to you that you can't answer, and I do miss that. But at the same time, what we gain, I guess, is a little more time to focus on the problem that we've put before us that we said we'd solve, or attempt to solve. So those are the differences.
Go up. Sure, go ahead. And then you'll be next.
Okay. We're funded through a mechanism.
Yeah, where do you get the funding?
Yeah, that's right. All of the agencies in the government get their research funding from their own budgets. So a portion of the NIH was originally part of the Navy Department, migrated to the Department of Health and Human Services at some point or another, and that was called Health, Education, and Welfare earlier, in the 60s, and then it became Health and Human Services, and so it gets its budget from Health and Human Services, but it's because it was an agency on its own. Before that, it gets sort of its own budget and other agencies. The Department of Energy takes its research budget from its own budget. DOE does the same. NIST does the same thing. So these agencies have budgets that are put forth to the government that have to pass through Congress and get approved, either as part of a bigger agency or as a single entity. And So that's how they're funded. Now, the NIH budget is about 85% of the NIH budget is toward the extramural community. So that's what NIH funds in large part, and 15% of it is the intramural research program, probably what you're referring to if you're asking me about researchers who work as government employees. And there are several labs throughout the country. They're not just where I am at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, but they're located throughout the United States. Nationally funded labs. There's one in more than one here at the University of Chicago. There's a comprehensive cancer center. There's a new cancer genomics center. There's the Batavia labs for physics labs. That's part of DOE. So when I say we don't have to write grants, it's true. We do not have to write grants. What we do is in our 4-year review in the NIH, intramural scientists have to write both a plan for the next 4 years and their accomplishments of the past 4 years, and that they're judged by a peer review committee, and they're given the possibility to either continue or their funding is decreased or their funding is increased. There's been none of the latter lately. There's been no funding increases, and that's coincident with, of course, the extramural funding decreases. And so, in any case, it's fixed to some extent on a 4-year basis from the structure of the intramural program of the NIH, specifically, if you're talking about that institution. The other institutions, I can't really comment on that much.
Just 10 seconds. That's different from institution to institution. So I know a lot about Sandia. I have a lot of friends there. They actually do write grants and they look for extramural funding. So every government lab is different. You'll have to ask people from specific labs.
I'm not, well, consultants solve problems, and in the finance field where a lot of physicists, some of the best financial engineers are physicists. And the reason they're successful or why they're drawn to the field is the experimentation logic is the same. It's just, physicists and applied math people are used to dealing with large data sets. They've developed programming skills to work with large data sets. They've developed techniques to filter data. They've developed techniques to deal with noisy data. And all those things translate pretty well into finance. So finance is built on some theoretical models. The Black-Scholes model is, I think, a physics equation which was translated. And it works, sort of, but it's built on the assumption of a normal distribution, which it doesn't hold true, but it's a good assumption, right? So a lot of models are like that. They're good and they're used, but in order for them to be used in practice, they need smart people that understand the theory behind them, but also know how to tweak them in a way in which they'll fit reality. And I think physicists do a lot of that too. Applied mathematicians do that as well. So that's pretty much it. I like asking candidates to talk about a particular situation where they solved a problem, and you can tell a lot from experiences like that, and what tools they use, where they gain information from, and a lot of problems you need that kind of broad background, and so it kind of comes through. So don't be afraid to have a bunch of experiences don't seem to be tied together, but it's also important to understand kind of how they do. They tie together in me because I really do enjoy solving complex problems, and subject matter to me isn't as important. It took me a long time to figure that out, why I like to do these different dispersed things, but that's sort of the underlying reason for it. So if I find somebody in a situation that they understand that and they can articulate it, then it's easier for me to say, aha, this person would be really, really good in this role because I know they could be successful early on, but I also know that it would challenge them enough that they could grow in the future. If that makes sense.
I don't think it's in my own case. I don't think it's so much tension, but the two both of them exist. I think when you're making cases for things that you want to do, you try to bring in both. Frankly, in terms of what I actually end up doing, I this is probably a terrible thing to say, but intellectual curiosity almost always wins out, just because the feelings of it are a little bit more immediate in me, but that's just me. I think there are many people where the tension, the pull and the tension would win in the other direction toward, really dedicating themselves to social responsibility. But sure, those elements are always there, I think. Did you want to say something about this, David?
No,
You looked like you wanted to say something.
Well, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about, I take my job seriously, but then I create a challenge within it. Maybe you do it as a two-stage process where you define what your social goal is, but then within that, create the challenge, and so that it doesn't conflict.
Any thoughts on that?
I think it's a great question because when you were saying that, I was thinking about all the people that I tried to emulate. And I think that's it. You see somebody that's doing something and you say, that sounds interesting. So that's how I did it, at least. I sort of, who do I want to emulate? And then I would find some people and I would say, I want to do exactly what they want to do. And that would kind of move me in a direction. And I can still remember some of those people. So it is a very, very impactful thing. And it's something that you guys should probably be trying to do, sort of learn from what other people are doing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I certainly can point to people that were really huge examples for me, and there were bad examples too, so you can learn from all of them. We're coming close to the end of our time, but we can still take a couple of questions, so you don't have to have a big sense of responsibility that you're delaying things if you want to raise your hand.
Well, I already admitted I was an exotic dancer, so that's certainly no. I'm kidding. And things are so much different now. I mean, you guys are so busy with all these different activities. We didn't have, at least I didn't do many of them. I was in a fraternity, and I had a lot of fun. But that was a great social experience, growing up with a bunch of guys and trying to figure out how to do something. But I know all the different clubs and different things that you guys have at your disposal now, and it's great. And I would certainly recommend you utilizing those, and because that really helps. Not only helps you find out what you want to do, but it helps firms and industries and understand that you've done some of this stuff before, so you can articulate an interest in it, which is really important when you're trying to choose between a number of different people that look alike for a particular opportunity. Having some that say, aha, look at this, I've got this on my resume that I was in the Blue Chips, or whatever it is, some kind of organization that did something like what the job is that you're going to be working at is very important.
I think this raises a very interesting point, and I thought that this was something unusual about the university, and I don't know if it's still true. Do you have to be able to swim to get your...
No.
No, you did. When I
No, you did.
Yeah, okay.
The requirements the year that the class of 2016 entered.
Oh, fail.
Well, nonetheless, that wasn't my major point, because it was part and parcel of another bigger package, which was that intramural athletics, not necessarily varsity athletics. We didn't even have a varsity football team when I was an undergraduate, and I'm sure you're all past that shame. But there was a strong encouragement to participate in intramural athletics, because it was, for one thing, it maintains health. The other thing, it introduces you to interacting with a team, if it's a team sport. And I was on the crew. I don't know if there still is a crew at the University of Chicago. We rowed out of Belmont Park at that time. And so I think crew is one of those things where teamwork is very essential and physical. In other words, you're paying exact attention to what the person up in front of you and behind you is doing, and staying in synchrony. It's literally trying to act as one physical body to propel yourself over the water. And what did that do for my career? I'm not sure, except that it led me to do more things on the water, and so it helped my career in a way that I can say is not expected, and that is that there's a lot of diversity that you can have in terms of what your hobbies are and your interests, and those build what we were saying before, being intellectually well-rounded. I mean, that builds into it, especially if the hobbies or sports aren't things that are just purely physical, but have some attribute that involves some intellect. And so from boating in a crew, since I didn't have a crew with me in graduate school, and never after I got into sailing, and I still sail, and I've actually taught sailing for almost 20 years. And sailing, of course, involves physics, and it has other aspects like navigation, and so you can learn about a lot of other disciplines, and it's something you can do into your old age. So I'd say that the way it helped my career was that it was an incredibly good escape. I could go sailing on a weekend and forget entirely about a problem that was frustrating me, or a pressure that I thought was so daunting, because I said to myself, I'm going to take this time, I'm going to do this, and because it's a challenging endeavor, it took your mind away from all those other things. And when you came back to the other things, they were different. And this leads to one more point, which is that the point that someone asked about crisis. Okay, so crises are to some extent perceived. So bad crises, real crises, are of course a bad thing. But we really have to look carefully at what your situation is when you say a crisis. I think, honestly, I felt sort of a crisis when I thought I was escaping a crisis to some extent by choosing to go to graduate school instead of going out and finding a job with what I had learned at the college in biology. I knew I could find a job because I had already gotten a job as a tech in a lab. But I was afraid, well, then I'll get sidetracked and I won't ever do what I really want to do. And so to some extent, I felt, and now I know it's probably not true, or not an important thought, that I was escaping by just going through another route of education. Believe me, by the time I was close to the end of the PhD, I was really sick of formal education. But that was just because it was intense. And even though I thought I would so love being in graduate school and doing cellular molecular biology, which was such a small, micro-focused world compared to general biology, and especially all the core curriculum that we had to take as undergraduates, I thought, oh my God, I'll be able to study just what I want to study, and it's going to be just wonderful. And in my second or third year of graduate school, I thought, my God, I have to study all these other things in biology. And so the whole world expanded again. And so I think that one of the things that you have to understand is this is partly perception. Both the idea of a crisis and the idea of being well-rounded is a matter of degree. Okay, so you can be well-rounded and then build your well-roundedness out through your entire lifetime, and that's a good thing to do. And using the hobbies that or sports or things that you were interested in as an undergraduate that you found were a pleasant distraction then, and that allowed you to become refreshed and re-energized about other problems that were academic, you should continue those. Those are important things to do. Those will help you throughout your career. If they don't help you get a job because you happen to meet someone doing the same sport who really needs a new person in the job, it's okay. It'll be in another indirect way, which is just to make you happy, keep you sane, and keep you fit.
Thank you. We're about 5 minutes over time, so I think we better call it up. We started 5 minutes late, so we got the full compliment. But I'd like to thank you for your questions, and let's give the panelists a round of applause.